Hey Rockstars, what's going on? SC Rocks here with another episode of Rocks Ranks, episode number deuce. If anybody out there can guess what that movie reference is, drop it in the comments below and I will send you something cool in the mail. Pretty cool movie, one of my favorites as I was a kid. I don't think anybody out there is going to get it, but deuce, episode deuce. So this one we're going to do my favorite top 5 80s family-friendly movies. Kind of family-friendly. Some of these aren't exactly PC correct now in 2022 or even, 2010. But in the 80s, it was okay to, use some of the terms that they used. Or probably wasn't okay, but they still used them anyway. Got a laugh from the kids. So in the first episode, I said I wasn't sure if I was going to go, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 being my favorite. Kind of midway through the video, I realized that's what I wanted to do. And then after I watched it, I was like, man, Matt Freeman should have been a lot higher than number 5. So, episode number 1, we're going to drop Matt Freeman, or put Matt Freeman up 3, drop him 3. I don't know, however we're going to do that. Matt Freeman's going to go ahead of Chris Novoselic and ahead of Lemmy. So Matt Freeman is number 3 on my top 5 bass players of all time. Just so you guys know if you watched episode 1. But for this one, number 5, we're going to start off with Ghostbusters. Who you gonna call? I won't sing because I guess in the first episode where I tried to sing Stained, it wasn't very good. So I won't sing, but who you gonna call? Ghostbusters. Came out in 1984. I was 3 years old when this movie came out, so I probably didn't watch it until the late 80s, I would guess. Maybe I did watch it in 84 and I don't recall, but everybody knows Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is a classic. Like I said, family-friendly movie. It's good for adults, it's good for kids, unless you're super scared of stuff, and then I guess, the gargoyles and stuff might scare you a little bit, but it's a really good movie. You got Dan Aykroyd, Rick Moranis, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, rest in peace, Harold, and one of my favorites of all time, Ernie Hudson. He only played a small part, but Ernie Hudson will always hold a space in my heart. You guys out there who know who I am know why. But anyway, a great cast of characters, great comedic timing throughout this whole movie. I don't think Rick Moranis gets the credit he deserves in this movie or throughout his career. Now that I think about it, actually, one of his other movies probably should have made this list. I'm not sure what year it came out, but anyway, Rick Moranis is one of my favorites. I really want to stress the fact that I'm not a Bill Murray fan just because everybody seems to love Bill Murray. I'm not saying I don't like some of his movies. I love Scrooged. I like Groundhog's Day. I like What About Bob? Those are probably 3 of my favorite movies of his besides Ghostbusters. But I just don't think he's as wonderful as everybody thinks he is. That's actually a handful of movies that are pretty good, but I don't know, there's just something about him that kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't know if it's just his personality from interviews or just maybe the fact that everybody just clamors for him and, he just doesn't do it for me. But Rick Moranis is gold. Dan Aykroyd, he's in another movie I almost put on this list, but I haven't seen it in so long that I kind of wanted to rewatch it. But I only have it on VHS and didn't feel like hooking it up on VHS. That movie would be My Stepmother is an Alien. I remember watching that all the time as a kid. I would walk down to the corner store and rent it and come back and watch it 4 times, in the 2 days and then take it back. Dan Aykroyd's in a bunch of stuff. He's The Great Outdoors with Dan Aykroyd and John Candy. So good. Another one of my favorites. That'll probably come up in another top 5 later on. But, so that's my number 5. Moving on to number 4. Gremlins. Another movie that came out in 1984, man. 1984 was just big with these family-friendly hits. But again, they could almost be called, horror. Like a family-friendly horror. Ghostbusters is that kind of genre. And then you got Gremlins, which is, kind of scary but still funny. It has a great cast. Like I said, everybody out there is going to know Gremlins. Everybody knows Ghostbusters. So the cast, just to name a few, is you got Zach Galligan, you got Phoebe Cates, Corey Feldman, who, if anybody watches any of my other videos, please go check out my other videos. No, I'm not a huge fan of Corey Feldman's acting ability. He's another one who I think was super overrated as a child star. Not saying he wasn't good in his later years, but man, just some of that stuff he did as a child actor was bad. B-A-D, bad. Corey Haim was amazing. I mean, there was just so many other child actors of that era that just, could have done what he did better, I think. But he became a star, so it is what it is. And something I forgot until I was actually putting together this video was that Howie Mandel was the voice of Gizmo. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys out there know who Howie Mandel is, maybe from Deal or No Deal. Maybe that's how you know him. But I know him personally from the number 3 on my list, but we're going to talk about Gremlins a little bit more. Gremlins, Gizmo, amazing. Just everything about Gizmo was pretty cool. Hey, would you look at that? What's up, buddy? Look at this little guy. It's Gizmo. Funny story about Gizmo here. So we picked him up on our way to a baseball game with Lil Dre and his girlfriend, who had no idea what Gizmo or Gremlins was. Yeah, I know it was put out in 1984, which is like 20 years before, maybe 25, before any of these kids were even thought of. But man, I thought everybody knew Gizmo and Gremlins. But, Gizmo, he's a cute little mogwai. There's not really a whole lot to say about Gremlins that I'm sure, hasn't been said before, or that I've even said before. I'm pretty sure I've talked about it in videos in the past. But the Howie Mandel thing was kind of cool to tie into my number 3. Number 3 for me on my top 5 is Little Monsters. Came out in 1989. It starred Fred Savage. At the time, his little brother, well, I mean, it's always been his little brother, but super little brother, Ben Savage. And Howie Mandel played Maurice. This movie was so good. Again, it was another family-friendly horror type movie. Now that I'm making this video, I realize how many are... I should have made that the title of the movie. But Fred Savage was one of my favorites as a kid. The dynamic of this movie was just so good. You had, a couple kids who were getting bullied. And I don't know, I guess I kind of felt like Fred Savage's character in this movie. He was kind of like the outcast, and the outcast SE rocks. So he was getting bullied, and nobody would believe the things he said, and I guess it just kind of made me feel like he was like me, kind of. But you also have the makeup that Howie Mandel had on. I loved it. Everything about it. The colors were cool, like his leather jacket, his leather vest over his denim jacket, the horns he had when, the sunlight comes out. Whoa. And that, that kind of ties into Gremlins too. You had the Mogwai who couldn't see bright light, bright light. And when Howie Mandel would see daylight, he would, dissolve into a pile of clothes. That's how he ended up getting his horns. So that's kind of a, cool little dynamic there between the two movies. And he also did Gizmo. I'm going to do a little research into that, and maybe I'll come back with, maybe a cool piece of information that even I didn't know. But if not, we'll get back to the video right here. So Little Monsters came out in 1989, as I said. I wouldn't say it was a huge hit, but it's definitely a cult classic now. Kind of like all these movies besides Ghostbusters that I'm going to name off. They became a cult classic. They weren't huge successes in the theaters. My number 1 probably bombed, I do believe. But there's a following. I think as they came out on VHS and more of the teenagers and younger kids were able to see these movies, they started to love them. And, now that we're old fucks and we love nostalgia, like all the stuff in this room, it takes us back to a time in our childhood where life was just easier and we didn't have to stress about everything or think about everything or worry about, were we going to do this right or do that right. We could just enjoy stuff. And that's what nostalgia is. And that's what this movie does for me, like even as I watch it now, is that nostalgia factor. I would love to meet Howie Mandel one day. He's one of maybe 10 people that I hope to be able to meet at a con. And I have a sweet print over here. I will be sure to throw it up. I got it at Astronomicon 2 years ago, and I would love to have him sign that. I kind of painted and sanded the frame myself, so it really makes it pop. But anyway, yeah, so that was my number 3 movie. All right, so my number 2 is Ernest Goes to Camp. And again, if any of you guys have watched any of my older videos, you know I love Jim Varney. All the Ernest movies, even the bad ones, are just, they're fun to watch, man. Jim Varney brought this just passion to the Ernest character that I don't know if I've ever seen another actor who took the character like Jim Varney did of Ernest and made it who he was. It was just something to connect with. Like, Ernest Goes to Camp, it's just so good. It's a family-friendly movie. It's about an adult who, you know, again, gets bullied. And he tries to do the right thing by the kids. And he gets his ass kicked, but he gets back up. It's like what life is. You get your ass kicked, but you get back up. But it was put into a family-friendly, you know, I would say it was more like a teenage movie, you know what I mean? And, God, just everything about the Ernest character I loved, especially in this movie. Something you guys might know is that Jim Varney actually performed the song, Gee, I'm Glad It's Raining, in one take. He did it in one take while they were recording the movie, and it's said that there wasn't a dry eye, you know, in the crew, which is amazing. Because I remember, even as a kid, man, when he's singing that song and the rain's coming down, just talking about it right now kind of makes me feel a little emotional. Because I remember getting choked up as a kid. And I don't know if it's just, you know, how his voice sounds, and the placement in the movie is perfect because he's just been getting his ass kicked the whole movie. And he's finally about to break. And Gee, I'm Glad It's Raining, you know, you can't see the tears. It's such a good song. His voice is so good in that song. And the fact that you know that he performed it in one take and all that emotion was real. That's just something that Jim Varney could bring to the table. He wasn't only Ernest, man. He was on Broadway. He was an amazing actor, but everybody knows him as Ernest because of all the heart and passion he dumped into that character. Another thing people don't know is that Jim Varney he was near genius IQ level. Another thing people don't know is that Jim Varney had a near genius IQ level. So he was smart, man. He wasn't this Ernest character that he became on the screen. He was so much more than that. He was almost a genius. But he played this character to entertain us, to bring our families together. And that's what I'll remember about him. You know, Ernest Goes to Camp was the first Ernest movie. He played the character before, but that was the actual Ernest movie. But I could list all his movies in a video. Ernest Goes to Camp. Ernest Scared Stupid is one of my favorite Halloween movies. Ernest Goes to Jail is freaking hilarious. It is probably in my top 3 favorite comedy movies ever. It's just so good. And he plays 2 characters in that. If you guys haven't seen Ernest Goes to Jail, please go watch it. But there's just every movie he's done, even like Ernest Goes to Africa or Ernest Slam Dunk. Like, they all have a special place in their time frame. And he was good at, you know, grabbing something and running with it. I kind of relate him in the later movies to like a pro wrestler getting a bad gimmick, but running with it and making it work. That's kind of what Ernest was. It was Jim Varney's gimmick. And, you know, Ernest Goes to Africa wasn't a good movie. But he took it and he ran with it and he made it something that we could watch. And I enjoy it. So that's my number 2. And my number 1. I'm sure you guys out there know it. Maybe, maybe not. But it is 1987's The Monster Squad. Monster Squad. There you go. There's some music for you guys out there that love it when I sing. I've talked about this numerous times. There's nothing really that I can say that I haven't said before. Fred Dekker directed it. He co-wrote it. If you guys know Fred Dekker, he also did a lot of other 80's movies. The Monster Squad being my favorite. He did RoboCop 2 which is pretty good. Andre Gower, who I had a personal experience with back in MySpace days. It's in one of my other videos. Go find it, listen to it. It's actually a really cool story. Andre Gower is another one that I have to meet at a con at some point. There's also a cool rumor, I don't know if it's cool, but a rumor that went around that the guy who played Wolfman in the Monster Squad was also the same guy who played Uncle Rico in Napoleon Dynamite. Not true, guys. You heard it here first on Rox Ranks. Uncle Rico was actually played by Carl Thibault. I'm not sure how you announce it. And Wolfman was played by John Grease. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but actually, the guy who played Uncle Rico is going to be at the Loons game on June 30th as like a meet and greet. So that's kind of cool. But that's a little, like rumor killer that I remember going around it was the same guy, and I remember thinking how cool it was, but not true. And another little thing that I probably just put in the back of my head and didn't want to remember is that in 2008, Rob Cohen was said to be in the works on a remake of the Monster Squad, and the rights had fell back to Paramount. It ended up not getting made. Thank whoever, man, because you can't remake the Monster Squad. That's just one of the movies you can't. I'm sure at some point they're going to, just like they're remaking The Crow. It's something that you're never gonna have that feeling that you got in the first one, which can be said about all remakes, but these nostalgic ones, like, fans fucking hate it when people remake them. And I would absolutely hate if the Monster Squad, I would go see it, and maybe I would like it, but probably not. It's not going to be the Monster Squad, you know what I mean? So that was my top 5 Rox Ranks. Keep rocking, and stay true.